So we're in your biology book in chapter 15 on the influences in an ecosystem, the second section there. We're going to be talking about ecology. And also ecology has to do with biodiversity, abiotic and biotic factors. Those are some of the things we're going to talk about in this section. So you can see here the different, of course, this being a different ecosystem than the areas of land. There's actually two ecosystems. One is of the water, aquatic, and one of the terrestrial. So let's begin. Carrying capacity and overpopulation. Carrying capacity, what is that? Carrying capacity is the maximum population size that an ecosystem can support. So that's the maximum that population, after that goes over that population, it can't support anymore and the population will start dying, right? Carrying capacity is different for every population. Remember, populations can be a population of deer or a population of plants or of certain kinds of plants, a population of maple trees or a population of humans too. A population will usually grow until it reaches its carrying capacity. After that, the rates of the organism's birth and death will be equal, so population stays about the same size. Favorable conditions can allow the population to grow beyond the carrying capacity. Unfavorable conditions can lower the carrying capacity. Overpopulation, what is overpopulation? The population is above the carrying capacity. So, now really, we're not going to really relate this so much to human beings, as some people think this world has become overpopulated. But I don't know if you've been out in the midst of the Nevada deserts or in Wyoming or into Siberia, these areas, and I don't see very many human beings there at all. So, but anyway, when we're talking about population, we're talking about the population of any single species of whether plants or animals. So, but overpopulation is when the population is above the carrying capacity. Biodiversity. Biodiversity is the number and variety of species living within an ecosystem. So that's the number and the variety. Biodiversity means variety. Bio means life. So we have the variety of life, the variety of species there, the different kinds of life there. The carrying capacity for one species depends on the biodiversity of other species in the ecosystem. Now, what does that mean? It means, so if you have a lot of different kinds of life and one life is becoming extinct or has died in that area, you still have other types of life, of biodiversity. So you'll still have other plants. If one plant dies, not necessarily all the animals are going to die, right? Or if one animal dies, not all of the plants and animals will die. So the biodiversity means the variety of species. And that biodiversity is important in certain ecosystems. The factors that affect carrying capacity and biodiversity. So what are these factors that affect? Well, we're gonna talk about factors and there's two different kinds of factors. But first of all, the energy transferred between organisms as one feeds upon another. So there's always gonna be energy transferred between a rabbit eating a piece of clover. He's getting energy from that clover. Or a hawk eating a rabbit. He's going to get energy from that protein of the rabbit, right? That's what it's talking about. Also, the recycling of nutrients from the environment to organisms and back to the environment. From the soil, so you have the soil. From the soil to the clover. The soil is growing the clover, and the rabbit's eating the clover, and then the hawk's eating the rabbit, and then the hawk dies and it goes back into the soil, and we have this nutrient cycle here going on, whether it's the plant growth and such here as they go. But we're talking about this cycle that goes around from the deer eating the grass, and on to the death of that, down into decomposing and then going back up this nutrient cycle. Abiotic. Remember, A means not. So bio means life. So non-living things. So abiotic factors would be non-living factors that we're going to be talking about. And two of them here of non-living factors that affect are radiation and temperature. So radiation is the sun provides all the basic energy of the ecosystem. So why is that? Here's the sun and the radiation. Here's a little earth right here. And here's our radiation belts here. But we're going on to the sun providing all this radiation because plants need sunlight for photosynthesis. If we don't have sunlight, if we don't have radiation, we won't have plants. And if we don't have plants, we're not going to have animals either. So the amount depends upon the geographic location around the earth and factors that block sunlight. So, of course, we know around the equator, the sun, we get more radiation at the equator than you do at the North and South Pole, that's for sure. And also, certain things block sunlight. Like a jungle, living beneath a whole jungle canopy gives shade and the radiation can't get clear to the bottom there. Or, mountainous areas. Another abiotic factor is temperature. Temperature is very important because the radiation, of course, warms the Earth's surface, and this temperature affects all plant activities. The absorption of water, photosynthesis, plant and animals activity. The temperature affects all plant activities, the absorption of water, photosynthesis, transpiration, respiration, germination, growth and reproduction, as well as activity and metabolism of animals. So temperature affects a lot. And we really live in a narrow temperature range, don't we, on Earth? So we have to have the right temperature, especially as human beings. So temperature is very important. So the colder temperature, you have to have life that can live in these cold climates. And then, of course, the hot temperature. Some animals and plants won't live in that hot temperature. Other abiotic factors, non-living factors, are water and atmosphere. Water is required for all of life. Living organisms mostly are composed of water. So are you. You're mostly composed of water. All physiological processes take water, from photosynthesis in plants to digesting in animals. Nutrients are carried from the soil into the streams and into the rivers and other ecosystems. We have to have water. If we didn't have water on this planet in the amount that we do, we would not be able to live here. So water from the rain clouds going down into our streams and rivers to our oceans, back up into the rain clouds. That's one system there. And then, of course, the water just having to be in our bodies. We need water. We only can live a very short time without water, a few days. Atmosphere is another one. The availability of gases such as oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor affect the survival of plants and animals. Fewer plants and animals live at higher elevations because of the thin atmosphere and lower oxygen levels. So, it's so important. Our atmosphere is so important here. Here's the water, here's the atmosphere. We have to have just the right amount of oxygen in our atmosphere. And the plants need just the right amount of carbon dioxide. And we need nitrogen also. And of course, we need water vapor. Now, of all the planets in our solar system, none of them have the exact amount of oxygen as we do on Earth. In fact, they haven't found any place like Earth where life can sustain itself outside of Earth. Other abiotic factors, non-living factors, are wind and soil. Let's talk about the wind. Wind, there are global wind patterns on our Earth that give rise to differences in temperature and rainfall at different latitudes. Wind also disperses plant pollen and seeds so the plants can grow in different places. And the distribution of plant species and produces currents. They need the currents in the ocean that move these plants around and the plant species around, bringing nutrients from the bottom of the ocean up. The Earth's annual revolution, the annual being yearly, as the Earth goes around the Earth goes around the sun, causes seasons to happen and different wind patterns. If we didn't have those wind patterns, the wind would be totally still. We'd have a hard time with our temperature and rainfall and everything else, and probably would not be able to live on this earth without the wind. Soil. Another abiotic or non-living factor is the soil. The type and quality of the soil influence the kinds of plants that grow there. Good quality soil supplies minerals needed by food crops. Soil is also critical in the ocean environment, the aquatic environment, as the underlying rocks will either inhibit, or as the soil stirred up, it will cause plants to grow in the ocean. We hardly ever think of that, do we? And of course, there's a lot of other abiotic physical factors like weather conditions. We have storms and we have hurricanes and floods and such. These affect climates. The climate affects in certain areas that temperature, that environment from that area. The topography of the land, is the land in the desert, is the land in the mountainous regions? That affects what lives there. The depth and mineral content of aquatic environments. So that ocean or that stream or that lake, the depth and mineral, that reflects what lives there. And also natural disturbances such as fires and floods and earthquake affect life on this earth. Tolerance range. What is this? Well, organisms have to live within a tolerant range for each of these factors. Tolerance range is a range of values that is needed for an organism's survival. Most living things have a very narrow tolerance range for temperature. So basically, we live between 32 degrees Fahrenheit and 122 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Or from freezing until the point where we can't tolerate. Basically, when it gets up to 122 degrees, that is pretty hot for human beings. But the optimal range is that range within an organism's tolerance range where it can survive good. Like 70 degrees. Oh, I just love it when it's 70 degrees. When it's down below 32 and it gets down to 75 below zero or something, we can't tolerate it very well, can we? Here's just a little picture, I know it's kind of a cartoon here, but you have the optimum range, that range of temperature especially, or that range where a fish or an organism can live well. And then as it goes out to different ranges, if you're talking about temperature, a little bit hot and a little bit too cold, you get stressed. And then there's a range that you'll die when it gets extremely cold or extremely hot. Biotic factors, those are living factors. They're important too. Biotic factors vary according to the ecosystems. The example in a mature forest of oak and maple trees, you'll have ferns, moss on the floor, a variety of shrubs and trees, mammals, insects, birds, millipedes, worms, protozoa, decaying bacteria, fungus that's feeding on the litter of humus. So that's a lot of biotic factors, isn't it? There are several thousand different species that may live together in a single ecosystem. Can you believe that? So we have a lot of biotic factors, living things that we live with. Even in our body, we have bacteria in our body, and onto all of the living things that are around us. Here's kind of a picture of that. You can see all these things that affect these biotic and abiotic factors, affecting life. You can look at the different from soil to organic material to the pH, cultural practices, nature, all these things, and all these different kinds of living organisms, and that affect our life in our ecosystem. Dynamic equilibrium. Here's a picture like weighing. Dynamic equilibrium changes. Dynamic equilibrium. Equilibrium means trying to make things equal, right? And dynamic means always moving. So we have always moving, trying to make things equal. That's a good way to remember. Although factors in an ecosystem are always changing or dynamic, the ecosystem as a whole remains the same, or tries to remain the same. In a stable ecosystem, free from external disturbances, the changes will balance each other out, and they'll live in this balanced ecosystem, right? When a disturbance does occur, the ecosystem will respond in a way that tries to balance the disturbance, and the result will be a new equilibrium, a new equal state. The example, let's take this as an example. Foxes, feed on rabbits, and then rabbits on clover, and then a new disease kills the rabbits. Well, the equilibrium will be disturbed because now the foxes can't eat the rabbits because they're dying of disease. The foxes will die for lack of food. And the clover will overgrow because there's no rabbits to eat the clover, so it overgrows. And then once the disease is gone, it will recover if the rabbits get over the disease. But the size of the population will probably be different from what it was before, but everything will try to equalize, dynamic equilibration, try to equal out. And that's the cycles of life on earth and how things get along and equal. The living things on this earth get along and equal out, right? So these are not, everything that I've really gone over is pretty simplistic. But the thing is, we just need to know the terminology. So we're trying to learn the language of ecology. And this is just these words. So you're just mainly learning this time what these words are and the definition. So if you know the definitions of these words, you'll get by pretty well, but knowing what they mean. But most of it is pretty common sense, don't you think? And that's God's wonderful creation.